Welcome to the Medal of Honor induction ceremony in honor of Staff Sergeant Robert J. Miller. Staff Sergeant Miller was awarded our nation's highest and most prestigious award for valor by the President of the United States, the Medal of Honor. This afternoon, he will formally be inducted into the Pentagon's most sacred place, the Hall of Heroes. Our hosts for today's ceremony are the Secretary of Defense, the Honorable Robert Gates, the Secretary of the Army, the Honorable John Mchugh, the Chief of Staff of the Army, General George W. Casey, Jr., and the Sergeant Major of the Army, Kenneth O. Preston. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the arrival of the official party and remain standing for the singing of our national anthem by Sergeant Major Robert Patillo from the U.S. Army Chorus and the invocation, which will be delivered by Chaplain Donald Rutherford, Army Deputy Chief of Chaplains.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
With many wonderful gifts, gave him great athletic ability. You blessed him with a talent for languages, blessed him with a large and truly loving family. We gathered today to celebrate and to acknowledge his extraordinary courage and selfless service. Truly his greatest gift was his faith instilled by his family, and knowledge that what he did, all that he accomplished, was done because of your great love of him. Rob Miller's greatest gift allowed him to reach out to the people of the Afghan villages and truly form a bond with them. This, he gained their trust and made their lives better. He was the type of hero who saw the hardships of the Afghan people and stepped up to the challenges, fully understood the hazards of combat and the risk of service to his nation, and each day lived the Special Forces motto, free the oppressed. Lord God, we celebrate his accomplishments, but above all, we celebrate his deep faith that strengthened him throughout his service. We pray that you send your spirit of consolation to be with his parents, Phil and Maureen, his brothers Thomas, Martin, and Edward, and his sisters Joanna, Mary, Teresa, and Patricia. May you watch over all of our troops that are in harm's way this day, especially the Green Berets of 3rd Special Forces Group. You continue to put our faith and trust in your great love for us until the time when we are all with you and Rob in your heavenly kingdom. We ask this and pray in your holy name. Amen.
Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, General George W. Casey, Jr.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming out here and joining us as we honor Staff Sergeant Robert J. Miller and the Miller family. And I know that nothing brings a family together than organizing them to get through security at the Pentagon in the morning. And the Millers have braved that. And some of the friends of the Millers who came on the bus might not have known it, but as you were walking in, Maureen was in my office tapping on the window to try to get your attention. I want to especially welcome the Miller family, and I'd like to take a second just to introduce them, because I've had the time to spend a little time with them over the last few days, and I can tell you that it's clear watching them interact with each other that each of them had a role in making Robert the man that he was. His mom and dad, Philip and Maureen, great to see you. Sitting next to his mom is his brother Tom, and Tom, wearing the uniform, is in the Special Operations Qualifications course. At dinner the other night, he was sitting between the Secretary of the Army and Lieutenant General Mulholland. And I can tell you, he looked like he'd rather be anyplace else in the world. Younger brother Ed, sister Mary holding granddaughter Lynn, and Lynn is gracing the front page of the White House website today with the First Lady. Therese in the second row, next to Pancho, who's a friend of Mary's, and I won't go beyond that, Pancho. Patty, next to Hank, I think the oldest grandchild. Marty, Joanne, and her husband, Mike. How about a big hand for all the Miller family? And I didn't want to leave out the little guy, Mark, who's in his mom's arms there and has done very well over 2 days of ceremonies. Secretary Gates, Secretary Mchugh, Sergeant Major, and Lieutenant General Bob Foley, Medal of Honor winner himself. Bob, thanks for being here with us, and thanks for your service to your Army and to your country. Today, we induct Staff Sergeant Rob Miller into our Hall of Heroes, a place of honor and inspiration inside the Pentagon that serves to remind us of why we serve and of the extraordinary sacrifices that ordinary Americans have made for their country and for their comrades. Over 3,400 Americans are enshrined in this hall. 2,400 of them are soldiers. Names like Joshua Chamberlain, Sergeant Alvin York, Sergeant Audie Murphy, Master Sergeant Roy Benavidez, Master Sergeant Gary Gordon, and Sergeant First Class Randy Shugart. Yesterday, Rob Miller became part of the history of our Army and of our country, and today he joins these heroes in the Pentagon. When I think about the Hall of Heroes, which is actually just down the corridor from here, and I think about the heroes that are enshrined in it and the history that they represent, I'm struck by how lucky we are as a country to have generation after generation of men and women who believe so strongly in the values and ideals that this country stands for that they're willing to put their life on the line to secure them. And I'm humbled to be part of an Army that attracts and produces men and women like Staff Sergeant Rob Miller. Rob was, by all accounts, an extraordinary young man, a natural leader, a skilled soldier, and a dedicated friend. He embodied the Army values and he lived the warrior ethos. I will always place the mission first. I will never accept defeat. I will never quit. And I will never leave a fallen comrade. In him, we see and glimpses of what is best about our country, America. Rob had a love of country and an infectious sense of adventure that led him to enlist in the Army in August of 2003. And like all of our servicemen and women today, he willingly joined an Army already at war. And right out of the gate, he headed for our toughest assignment, Special Forces. Since their founding, Army Special Forces have been our elite, masters of unconventional warfare and in training foreman militaries. President Kennedy recognized this in 1962 when he authorized Army Special Forces to wear the Green Beret. He called that beret a symbol of excellence, a badge of courage, and a mark of distinction in the fight for freedom. Today, these truly quiet professionals remain the best our nation's military has to offer. Rob wore his Green Beret proudly and moved quickly through the ranks. His leadership skills were clear. He was promoted to sergeant in just 2 years. He became a non-commissioned officer and a leader of soldiers. At only 24, he was the youngest member of his company, 8th Company, 3rd Battalion, 3rd Special Forces Group. Yet Rob earned a reputation for taking on difficult challenges and leading from the front. And he did this and more on that January morning in 2008. The President spoke eloquently yesterday about Rob's actions that day, capturing the intensity of the pre-dawn action in which Staff Sergeant Miller single-handedly attacked into the overwhelming fire of a force of more than 100 insurgents in prepared defensive positions. And even after he was wounded, he maneuvered to engage the enemy and continued to draw the fire of the insurgents onto himself to allow his team to move to covered positions. This extraordinary valor ultimately saved the lives of the 7 members of his own team and 15 Afghan soldiers. For these heroic actions, President Obama awarded Staff Sergeant Miller the Medal of Honor. And in doing so, he talked about the bond of trust that has bound the soldiers of our Army together and sustained us through 9 difficult years of war. Nowhere is that bond more prominent than in a Special Forces A team. After movingly recounting Rob's actions that day, the President said this: "This is the story of what one American soldier did for his team, but it's also a story about what they did for him." 2 of his teammates braved the bullets and rushed to Rob's aid. In those final minutes, they were there, at his side, American soldiers there for each other. The relentless fire forced them back, but they refused to leave their fallen comrade. When reinforcements arrived, these Americans went in again, risking their lives, taking more casualties, determined to bring Rob Miller out of that valley. And finally, after fighting that rage for hours, they did. I will always place the mission first. I will never accept defeat. I will never quit. I will never leave a fallen comrade. Such is the ethos of our American soldier, and such was the ethos of Staff Sergeant Rob Miller and his team. As a nation, we owe the Miller family a debt of gratitude for the sacrifice Rob made and for the sacrifices that they continue to make every day so that others might enjoy the freedoms that he held so dear. Rob Miller will be forever remembered. His story, his life, his legacy of courage, valor, and sacrifice is preserved in our hearts, etched on the walls of this building, and woven into the fabric of the history of the United States Army and this country. Generations of Americans will be inspired to service of others from looking at Rob's story. May God bless Rob and keep the Miller family safe, and may God continue to bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable John Mchugh.
When the chief didn't take the stairs, I felt compelled not to take them either. That's as much exercise as I've had in quite some time. I know I speak for Secretary Gates, the chief, Sergeant Major, when I say what an honor it is for all of us to be here, to have this opportunity to, as the chief so aptly stated, celebrate, yes, the heroic actions of an incredible soldier, but also celebrate the family that played the formative years that brought him to that moment in time. And I would tell the Miller family we have a veritable array of Pentagon luminaries who have joined us, the Undersecretary of the Army, Secretaries Hale, Secretary Stanley. I've just got myself in a lot of trouble for starting to name people because I could not name all of those in the time allotted who have joined here to celebrate the life, the times, the great heroism of your son, Staff Sergeant Robert Miller. We are indeed awarding, as the President conveyed, this great honor for a single moment, but it really is a celebration of an entire life. And I'd like to, in the time allotted to me, to the Miller family, speak a bit about that extraordinary life that was Staff Sergeant Robert Miller. You know, years ago, Ronald Reagan, when he was president, observed some people go their whole life wondering if they ever make a difference. He then said, but Marines don't have that problem. Now, I would be willing to wager that if President Reagan were here today in these times, he wouldn't hesitate to include soldiers, but not just soldiers. In fact, all the men and women who don the uniform of this great nation, particularly in time of war, into that same category. But by any measure, Staff Sergeant Robert Miller causes no need to wonder. He made a difference, a great difference, not just that fateful moment in that theater, but in many days of his life. As we've heard, he sacrificed his life to make a difference for his fellow soldiers. He upheld the values that he coveted most dearly in order to secure our nation's future. Those ideals of loyalty, duty, selfless service, honor, perhaps most of all, personal courage. To those who knew him best, his family, his friends, teachers, mentors, his fellow Green Berets, Robert's actions probably didn't come as a surprise. It really was how he led his life, day in and day out. Born in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania on October 14th of 1983, Rob started a life that would be continuously marked by force and passion. He was the second of 8 children. He was a daring and innovative boy, walking by his 7th month, but for Rob, walking, even at that early age, apparently wasn't quite good enough. His mother recalls how soon as he was able to navigate on 2 feet, he began to drag a chair around with him to explore new spaces, particularly her kitchen countertops. During one of his last visits home, his mom, Maureen, recalled that Rob displayed once again that somewhat enduring wild streak he had while growing up. Seems Rob was driving his mom home while holding a soft drink in one hand, adjusting his iPod in the other. No simple task for most us mortals, but he was also doing those things while driving hands-free, kind of navigating with his knees, in a pickup truck that, oh yeah, by the way, operated with a stick shift. I'm told despite his mother's protest, he, as always, just laughed, stating, I know what I'm doing. Rob always found a way to live life on his own terms. Moving with his family to Wheaton, Illinois at the age of 5, he attended St. Michael's School from 1st through 8th grades. There he discovered his love for sports, particularly gymnastics, and later basketball and track. At St. Michael's, Rob developed a ferocious intensity, particularly for those things that interest him. He always went the extra mile for those areas, especially history. Bill Cashin, St. Michael's physical education teacher, remembered Rob as being, as he put it, nice to everybody and a fun kid to have in class. While his 8th grade teacher, Peggy Flynn, recalled that he was very responsible, someone who respected traditions. By all accounts, Rob was your average American kid. He loved to reenact episodes of The Simpsons, if you can manage to imagine that. And he often pretended to be, what else, but a teenage mutant ninja turtle, going so far as to mimic their patented karate moves. Now, through it all, Rob showed an early, persistent interest in the military. In fact, he often got caught putting on his dad's old Army uniforms. His parents recounted the many times he would listen intently to their dinner table stories about the Cold War, their time spent in Berlin and the Soviet Union. And once, as part of an 8th grade assignment where you needed to interview a veteran, Rob energetically contacted his parents' former chaplain in order to talk to him about his unique experiences during World War II. It became pretty clear early on for Rob, it really wasn't a question of if he would join the military, but rather when. And throughout his too brief life, he followed his passions wherever they led. He developed his knack for languages, something that many in his family share. First mastering Latin, very easy language, then Spanish, and later French. It was a skill that would make a crucial difference the night he lost his life saving his comrades when he gave orders in Pashto, a language he had taught himself that saved Afghan soldiers with him that night from certain destruction. He also discovered classical music and cultivated an interest in geography and military history. He even read The Art of War by Sun Tzu, a task most soldiers desperately try to avoid until they're ordered to do so at our most senior levels. But it really was a testament to Rob's passion and his love of the Army and his love of learning. But whatever the challenge, whatever the pursuit, Rob gave it his all, never halfway, never half done. Throughout high school, Rob's first love, as I mentioned earlier, was always gymnastics. He led the school's team as co-captain during his junior and senior year, a leader already. With his intense drive and leadership pushing them to win, his team placed 5th in the state championships. Chad Downey, his high school gymnastics coach, once described Rob's extraordinary dedication when he noted, "One of his amazing qualities is how hard he would work when he put his mind to something." And as the president mentioned yesterday, that coach would often have to kick Rob out of the gym after a 3-hour practice because, as he put it, "I wanted to go home." In sports or life, Rob Miller was determined and relentless. The way Rob's friend Brian Melvin put it, he was intense, no joke. But despite his determined and relentless nature, Rob always has had a quick smile and a joke to lighten things up. Right after school, with all due respect to our fellow services, he had a momentary lapse of good judgment and he tried to become a midshipman. But as fate would have it, he was colorblind, and that forced him to abandon his dream of the Navy, and yet he remained committed to an idea of service. Fortuitously, for the 22 Afghans and Americans he would save one day, his life instead took a different path. Rob attended the University of Iowa in hopes of joining the Hawkeye gymnastics team, and although he didn't make the roster, he continued to devote time to work out with the team and lend a hand at meets as often as he could. His parents would later account an incident where Rob, after helping to clean up after a competition, made some students retrieve a rumpled American flag they'd carelessly thrown into a closet. He instructed them how to render the proper respect to our national symbol, and from what I've learned about Rob Miller, I'm just guessing those students learned that lesson awfully well. Ultimately, college did not satisfy Rob. He left the University of Iowa after just 1 year to follow an older and a more deeply felt passion. And in 2003, enlisted directly in the Army with no prior service as a Special Forces candidate. To Daniel Kuhn, mentor and leader of Hawkeye Gymnastics, Rob's choice made perfect sense. He said, enlisting was a suit of clothes that fit him. And after he completed 2 years of assessment and qualification and weapons training, Robbie, as his teammates called him, finally donned his green beret, and he began the career he always wanted, something in which he would excel for far too short a time. But as a soldier, Rob maintained that same spirited, carefree manner he had as a teenager. Among his peers, he was known for making his teammates laugh. When times got hard, he always managed to say the right things to keep them going, and everyone who worked with Rob considered him an outstanding soldier. Many thought he was, as they put it, way too smart for his job. And off duty, Rob possessed a zest for life that also stood out. His friends would often find him home cooking a gourmet meal, listening to classical music, or cleaning his weapon to the sound of hard rock. Try to figure that out. Rob's friends just never knew what to expect. With his rich, varied interests, his many talents, Rob was comfortable in any setting. And as the chief described on his second deployment to Afghanistan as part of Alpha Company, 3rd Battalion, 3rd Special Forces Group, Rob would quickly distinguish himself as one of the best among his elite teammates. Youngest member of Alpha Company, he was known for his skill with weapons, his fluency in languages. He'd already mastered 4 and was learning Russian in his spare time. And with his unflagging enthusiasm and willingness to take on the most difficult missions, Rob was the go-to guy in the midst of the most elite, motivated warriors in our Army. Rob Miller wouldn't have had it any other way, and on the night of January 25th, 2008, he volunteered one last time. And as always, he unhesitatingly stood up, saying to his commander, as he so often did, "I got this one. Send me." Staff Sergeant Robert Miller was an outstanding soldier and a hero. He was funny, generous, passionate, and determined. And glimpsing these brief moments of his life leads to an inescapable conclusion. He's something I think we'd all like to